have we reached the end of American politics?
As dark as these times may be, every single day, all of us have the opportunity to be the light, because those who want this to be the end of politics, those who want this to be the end of democracy, want you and I saying it's over. If you shut down that family member or that friend of yours saying you're ignorant, you're wrong, you're stupid, you're never gonna get them to open up.
But the messaging on the left, quite frankly, has sucked.
Because they're so consumed with making sure to include every single possible person.
Last thing before we get out of here, we play another game on the show. It's called Life or Death Hip-Hop Karaoke.
Oh my God.
What up, what up, what up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome back to another edition of the Charles Coleman Podcast, your favorite podcast. I don't even have to do the introductions.
How do you know it's their favorite podcast?
Because it just is. It is. It already is.
You're manifesting its success.
Of course.
I like that.
You see that?
I like that.
You see
I like
that?
it. Your favorite podcast.
You don't even have, I don't have to do the intro. I don't have to tell you where to find us. Spotify, Pandora, Apple, Google, all of the places, YouTube, all of the things. Because you see what it is and you know what time it is. I always say that I work with dope folks. And today I have the pleasure of bringing the dopest to the couch. Please give a warm welcome to my friend, my colleague, someone who I have sort of adopted as a mentor in the media space, the lovely Stephanie Rule.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So good to see you. So good to have you on the couch.
If you've adopted me in the mentor space, you've screwed.
Not at all. Really, really good to have you. Thank you for being here.
I'm honored to be here. This is amazing.
She has shown so much love to the podcast just in terms of my intro. You've seen her on CNBC. You've seen her on Bloomberg. You've seen her on NBC. You've seen her on the Today Show. You've seen her on, of course, the 11th Hour, where you've seen me on MSNBC. And now you get to see her on the Charles Coleman Podcast. So
and I'm thrilled to be here.
This is exciting. So before we get started, we have a game that we play just to sort of loosen things up when I have my contributors here. It's called One's Gotta Go, all right? And so I give you 4 things, and I realize that, like me, you are a child of the 70s and sort of grew up in the 80s. So today's category is 80 pop culture movies.
Oh my God, I thought we were about to play Marry, F, Kill. Woo, this is so much better than I thought. Yes.
One's Gotta Go. So I'm gonna give you 4 movies, and one of them's gotta go, all right? 16 Candles.
Oh, I love it.
Breakfast Club.
Love it also.
St. Elmo's Fire.
Worship it.
Karate Kid.
I can't. I mean, this is impossible. I mean, I would like to say about all of them except Karate Kid, you know they're dirtier than you realize?
Yes, that's kind of the thing though, too.
All of them are dirtier than you realize because each one holds a very special place in my heart. And so I always corral my kids together. I'm like, yo, guess what we're gonna watch? And then they start and I'm like, what? I mean, it's like if you watch Coming to America.
Right, there's so many things.
Who remembers that opening scene where they're in the pool? Correct. Where I'm sitting there next to all of my kids as they're going, what is she doing underwater? And I'm like, let's change the channel. God. I guess I'm going to go 16 Candles.
Really?
Only because I just think all of the rest have more significant meaning, right? One of my children, I actually talk about Karate Kid a ton. I have a child who's got a little bit of Johnny in him.
Really?
And, yes. And we're constantly talking about the movie. And I'm like, listen, you have all of the great things going for you. Don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick.
Right?
Don't be a dick.
Like, I do believe kind is the new cool, and Karate Kid is the best way to teach this to your children.
I think that there are so many different lessons in Karate Kid.
Totally.
And as a mentor to younger kids, I often refer to it because it's just one of those things that if you watch the movie and then you make references to it, you can't help but to want to adopt some of it because
100%.
It's just one of those things. So I get it. What a lot of people don't know about you that I'm glad you brought up is you're a super mom. Like, and I watched this from a distance because with everything that you do, and I don't even know if you were there. I was having the conversations with one, I think it was your eldest, and I was like,
I almost brought one of my kids today.
You should have.
I almost brought him. Yeah.
Like, I love when I get a chance to see him. I'm like, yo, y'all don't realize how dope your mom is. I know it doesn't feel that way because you're just mom to them, but you are a super mom. So 16 Candles has got to go?
16 Candles. I mean, Set Almost Fire was like, at the time for me, like the sexiest movie I'd ever seen.
I get it.
I just loved it so much. I just think 16, and Breakfast Club is so iconic. Like each character I connect with. 16 Candles is my one that I love the least. And when I think about movies that I watch with my kids right now, it's probably the most inappropriate culturally. Probably the most inappropriate.
Stay away from
that. But I love
one.
them all. But I love them all.
I figured that would be a tough one. We always play it.
Better Off Dead is really high up for me too, just so you know. Yes.
So for me, like the other one that's high up is Lost Boys.
Oh, I can't.
See?
I mean, Lost Boys is one of the best movies of all time.
Of course.
Of all time. And completely underrated.
I think that like young Kiefer Sutherland, just that era of those actors. So I had a chance to meet on another note. So my favorite movie, you may not like rock with this. My favorite movie is Goonies.
Really?
Oh, yeah, of all time.
Of all time?
All time. Very few people who know me know that. Like, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but like Goonies is like my favorite. What a weird ass
pick. I mean, I happen to really like Goonies.
Yeah, some people are like, for your favorite of all time.
Of all time.
All time. So I happened to meet Steven Spielberg one day when they were celebrating the 75th anniversary of NBC News. And he showed up.
He was there, yes.
And like it was the coolest thing ever because like Valerie Jarrett is there, and I spoke to, and I'm just waiting to talk to Steven Spielberg, and I talked to him, and I was just like, hi, Mr. Spielberg, I'm the biggest Goonies fan ever. And he was so excited. He had like questions, like he's like, what is it about that movie?
Yeah, what is it? Why do you love it so much?
I think number one, given my age at the time, just the idea of this adventure and being a young man and like growing, it's a coming of age story in a lot of ways.
Outsiders.
Yeah, and then there's also the notion that like the kids have to step away from their parents in order to save their parents. And then in the process, there's like this journey of self-discovery. And then there's like a playful sort of like almost competition for being the leader among the young men, and they all sort of find their way in their specific lane, which I thought was dope.
But they also, listen, all of them are in broken circumstances, and they create this beautiful brotherhood.
They make it work, right? Yes. Exactly. They make it work, right? Like even and it's very much in the tradition of for me as a young man, you're thinking about Lord of the Flies, you're thinking about Stand By Me, you're thinking about all of these stories. Particularly around like adolescence and what it is to sort of find your way. And so that's a big part of what attracted me to that. So.
There's much more love in Goonies than the other two.
Oh, by far. But that's why I like it, because it's funner.
Yes.
Right? There's this fun, there's this adventure of fun. Yes. And it's kind of like this relatively innocent mischief that they kind of even start with to embark on this journey, which is why I love it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I like that.
Fun facts. So, transitioning to our main conversation.
Vampires in Northern California.
Well, there's that part, right? Or
Lost Boys.
Adventures
Who would have picked that?
Astoria, Oregon, right?
There you go. Yes.
I just got to ask, and this is from, I was at home and I was watching a special, and our colleague Joy Reid and you were sort of going back and forth. I'm just going to ask, have we reached the end of American politics?
No.
You don't think so?
No, never. I mean, listen, I'm forever the House optimist.
Okay.
And as dark as these times may be, every single day, all of us have the opportunity to be the light, and I'm not going to give in to the dark.
That's consistent with who I know you to be, both on and off camera. That is very consistent.
Here's why I'm telling you this, because those who want this to be the end of politics, those who want this to be the end of democracy, want you and I saying, it's over, we're done. It was 7 years ago that Steve Bannon, who I believe is really the puppet master behind so many things in Republican politics today, he did an interview, I can't remember who it was with, and it was when he was talking about how much he respected and admired Stalin. And he said, I just want to blow the whole thing up, right?
It's very clear that that's
up. And that is what he wants to do. And if you look at sort of that far right, it's crazy to me when we call it conservative faction of the Republican Party, because in my mind, when you think about conservative, Conservative are people who are rooted in, whether I subscribe to them or not, very, very traditional American family values. That is not what far-right conservatives are today. And so when you look at that movement that's making a lot of noise and creating a lot of disruption, none of those people are actual legislators or lawmakers, okay? You tell me, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert.
Josh Hawley.
Not Josh Hawley so much, but take those guys. What bills have they led that were signed into law?
Right.
Okay?
That's the thing. And
that's what, when you talk about politics and lawmaking, it's people who show up with a set of ideals. They have to figure out, who are my constituents in total? How do I serve them? And then how do I pull together enough votes, enough voices to get my agenda passed? And so those really loud, disruptive voices right now are causing all sorts of problems. But I do believe this will pass, but not if we just hear idly saying like, it's over, it's over. We can be part of the solution. And I'm not saying we as Republicans or we as Democrats, we as voting Americans.
So you mentioned for a second, you mentioned Steve Bannon. And I do think that on a lot of levels, he doesn't have, or he isn't held to a lot of accountability in terms of what role he played here. But I want to go back even a little bit further.
It's a gift of being a puppet master behind the scenes.
Do you think that this is a continuation of Karl Rove, or do you think that this is something worse and different? Because I look at sort of the like fear-mongering and the use of those tactics to invite or open the door and usher into a new era of politics where truth became relative and malleable among the electorate. And I look at it not necessarily starting with Karl Rove. We can go further, way further back.
Karl Rove may have opened the door.
Right.
But in the same way that when Mark Zuckerberg says, like, I didn't know, the monster I was creating, Karl Rove didn't know what was coming here.
I think that that's fair.
He had no idea.
I think that's fair.
I think this whole, it was 2 months after President Trump was elected. And I remember Kellyanne Conway, a former spokesperson for him, was on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd. And it was the first time I heard it. And it was, in theory, you could say, like, who cares about crowd sizes? But remember, Trump was insisting that he had this enormous crowd that he didn't have.
Right.
And people were obsessing over it. And I remember at the time being like, who cares? We have to care, because when the person who occupies the Oval Office is blatantly lying about something as disprovable as that, what else would they lie about, right? So Kellyanne Conway's on TV with Chuck Todd, and he actually pulls up the two pictures that says, here's what the president is trying to claim the crowd was, and here's the truth. And she says to Chuck, oh, well, those are alternative facts.
Right.
And I'll never forget the day she said alternative facts, where I was like, okay, mark this day down. And then that became a reality of, you might believe one thing and I might believe another, and then we have two different truths. And so what we can do is be disappointed in that, give up on it, or we can sit here plugging along and talking to that neighbor who has different views than you do, and talking to that family member who doesn't, and just respectfully talk them through the truth. It was just recently, somebody was on TV with me, and they were talking about the dispute in Gaza City over this explosion that happened in a hospital.
In the hospital, yep.
And, early on, people, blamed Israel. Now they're saying, no, it was Hamas or it was another terror group. But the saddest thing was, I had a reporter on who covers the region, and she said, they're going to get to the truth. She said, it's too early to know exactly what happened. And she said, eventually we'll get to the truth. And she goes, but the problem is, the truth doesn't matter.
Right.
People are going to believe what they want to believe.
Right.
And so while she's right, people are going to believe what they want to believe. I'm not going to accept that that is our permanent state of being. And what we have to do is keep reporting the truth no matter what it is.
You touched on something that I wanted to get into that I'm really glad you mentioned, and you were just talking about the notion of how we have discourse and dialogue with friends and family and things of that nature. I've had the pleasure of meeting your mom, who is a lovely, lovely woman. I 100% understand where you get your spunk from, People always ask me like, something's different about Stephanie. And like before they even get into it, I'm like, she's a Jersey girl. And they're like,
it's Jersey.
Oh. I'm like, it's the fact that she's from, that's what it is. And they're like, that's what it is. I'm like, that's what it is.
Yes. It's the Garden State.
Your mom's political leanings are different.
Totally.
Your mom is a bit of a conservative.
She absolutely is.
And she's a Republican.
She is.
I'm asking you, what I want to ask you is, are there any particular lessons that you have taken from discussions or conversations with your mother about just sort of the best ways to get into conversation with people who disagree with you? And as simple as that sounds, I think it's important for viewers in the audience because we're in a very polarized space now. And we don't necessarily always know how to do that. So I'm curious, how do you do
Listen, it's super hard. You have to chip away at it. You know, my mother comes to the city every weekend. And I know when she arrives on Friday, the amount of crazy ass news that she has been ingesting throughout the week is about to lay down in my house, right? She walks into my house and she is already saying to my sons, like, boys, don't forget, make sure you run into a doorman building. If you see something, say something. There's slashes all over the place. There are not slashers.
Can we acknowledge the code switch of the accent, though?
I mean,
can we acknowledge that?
Like, she somehow is telling them that a slasher is coming for them on 82nd and Lex. I mean, it's just like...
Have you ever reported about a slasher?
No, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. However, do I think crime is up? I do.
Sure.
Do I think safety is a big problem? It's an issue. It's an issue for people who don't even care about politics. But I do think that as hard as we all work and the amount of taxes we all pay, that we enter into a belief that the government is going to protect us. That when we walk into a restaurant, we're not going to get held up, right? That our kids are safe walking to school. So while my mother is absolutely incorrect, and she does subscribe to a flavor of news that plays on her fears.
Yeah.
And then they just keep pushing it and pushing it. I'm not going to, if you shut down that family member or that friend of yours saying, you're ignorant, you're wrong, you're stupid, you're never going to get them to open up.
Sure.
Right? But you just have to chip away at it, right? So she's showing up to the city like, boys, oh my God, the slashes. And so then I'm going to spend my whole weekend with her walking around New York City. And then before she rolls out on Sunday night, I'm like, how'd it work out with the slashers this weekend? Right? And then she has to kind of acquiesce that it was perfectly fine.
Right. I think the frustrating part for me with that conversation, because I know a lot of people, we have been in a space for a while. The notion of crime as a talking point politically is not new. We've been there since the Law and Order days of the 60s. And there's been an evolution of it every so often in electoral cycles. I think what bothers me is the sort of weaponization of crime as a talking point when you look at where crime is occurring, who's in leadership there, what they've done about it, and what they haven't. And even now, for example, you look at the big talking point during midterms was, look, we're going to do something about crime. That was the big talking point.
And there was no agenda to do so. However.
And that was, Hunter Biden, though.
But
that's the thing, right? Like, so.
But here's the thing. Democrats do need to be more practical.
Listen.
They need to be more practical and not be such purists. You have to realize, what is the other side going to say? So in my personal view, one of the most frustrating things about crime, you have seen Democratic mayors, you've seen Democratic governors, you've seen the president spend an enormous amount reinvesting in safety. However, who came up with the phrase defund the police must be a Republican strategist, because there was no greater gift to Republicans than that phrase.
And that's really another thing that I wanted to sort of touch on is this notion that for me, when I'm looking at the news cycle, when I'm watching everything that's taking place and I'm analyzing, all right, how's this going to play out? One of the biggest things that I have as a gripe with the Democratic Party in general is, number one, the lack of a succinct, easily digestible, and credible message. And number two, an inability to identify a strong messenger to communicate it.
Okay, if there's
Like,
one
dude.
positive thing to say about Donald Trump,
Yes, you're absolutely right. Marketability of a
he's
message.
a phenomenal marketer. He's a branding superstar.
I tell
Remember
people all the
this.
time.
This man inherited a real estate portfolio worth a fortune in New York that he squandered into nothing, okay?
Right.
If he would have actually held on to the real estate assets he inherited, he would be the multi-billionaire he claims to be. He's a failed business tycoon. What he's brilliant at is marketing.
I tell
and
people this all the
branding.
time.
Okay?
The
best thing he ever did was The Apprentice. And then as a president, as a candidate, he understands messaging. And he keeps it tight, and he keeps it short, and he repeats it over and over and over.
He understands
Half of
messaging.
it being lies.
He understands messaging, and he understands his audience and what they gravitate to. I tell people all the time, for what it's worth, in 2016 or 2015, during the campaign cycle, regardless of where you stood on the spectrum, you were very clear about what the messaging from that side was. It came out, Make America Great Again, America First. Those were the big talking points. You didn't know what it meant, right? But it sounded good, and it was digestible and repeated by everyone
and
on
they
that
wrapped
side.
themselves in the flag,
That
and
was
they
it.
hijacked
Correct.
the word patriotism.
And
Brilliant.
then I asked people, think back, what was the opposing message? And it was like, oh, the middle class. We're gonna, and I said that does not work for the average voter. You have to have
For
something
any voter.
that is going to be succinct, that they at least sort of kind of know what it means, even if they don't know what you're gonna do, that they can sink their teeth into and say, this seems to represent ideals that I agree with, that I'm in line with. And then from there, you can talk about how you intend to achieve that. But the messaging on the left, quite frankly, has sucked. It's
because
sucked for a very
they're
long time.
so consumed with making sure to include every single possible person and not to offend any possible person. It's sort of like Democrats are unwilling to sing happy birthday until they can guarantee every kid in America has a cupcake. And while I would love for that to be the case, that ain't gonna win elections.
That's very interesting to hear from you. I agree with you. I have long since said that the Democratic sort of intuition of trying to expand the tent to get everyone under it is going to make the tent pop.
It's one of the reasons they fail at economic messaging, because even when they have a great economic story to tell, they're afraid to tell it because they know some people are left out. Now, here's the thing. Some people are always going to be left out. Now, what Democrats need to realize is, but we need to work on this positive economic messaging, because if we don't and we lose, the people who we're worried about, who are going to be left out, are going to be way more left out when all the social programs that they're dependent on get cut if Republicans win. Well, it was a couple of years ago, I remember talking to someone in the White House. And at the time, I felt like there was 5 very clear positive points about the economy they could make. And we're just on the phone talking about it. And the last one was the performance of the stock market. And he was like, 1, 2, 3, and 4, I agree with you on, but number 5, and we can't say that. And I said, why? I said, do you know who looks at their 401ks every day? As much as it is wealthy hedge fund managers in New York, it's teachers, it's firefighters, it's nurses trying to figure out, when can I retire?
That middle class that seems to be so
when you
elusive.
think about who owns the stock market, it's pension funds, it's insurance companies. And so like this misconception that it's just Wall Street fat cats, it's not. And this fear that Democrats have in touting a positive economic message is a huge mistake. Because in my opinion, one of the number one things people vote on is the economy. And how the economy is treating them.
It goes back to James Carville's sort of like catchphrase of, it's the economy, stupid.
It is.
And he's not wrong. He's absolutely right. We haven't talked a lot today, and I'm glad, about 45, because we always talk about Trump and all that. But I want for a quick second for us to talk about it from a media perspective, because I remember back during the campaign, before he was elected president, I think it was 2014, 2015, I was at another network, and I remember saying to an anchor, I said, he is a much more difficult cover than a lot of people give credit to at the time, because I think at the time there was this assumption that, we'll be able to figure it out. I said, he's a much harder cover than a lot of people think, because even if you are a journalist with the greatest amount of integrity, fact-finding, all the above, you're dealing with an audience for whom facts do not matter, and he plays on that.
He also made himself extremely accessible.
Right. So you don't even have to go to the news. Like, come to me. I'm your source, because you can't trust that. That's fake news. So he's invalidated or attempted to invalidate a lot of what media already does. How do you feel like at this day and age, when you know what a thing is, you've seen it before, you've watched it operate, you know what it's going to do, how do you sort of draw the line in terms of this is essential coverage that the American people needs, and like, Donald Trump told another lie, so what?
So it's really tricky, because to not cover it,
that's the challenge.
You're normalizing it and you're accepting the lie. Right? You're accepting the lie and you're giving it the chance to spread. However, Donald Trump does subscribe to all press is good press. Mm-hmm. And I can remember during his administration having a conversation with his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who was a senior advisor. And I don't remember what I was complaining about, but Jared said to me, look up at your TV. He goes, goes, are you in an office? Are there multiple TVs? And I said, yeah.
His voice is not that deep, by the way.
Okay, that's 100% true. Because the first time Jared Kushner called me on the phone, I thought I was getting punked.
Tammy told me this story.
He'd call me on the phone on a Friday afternoon at 3:00, and I answer, and it's like, hey, Stephanie, it's Jared. And I'm like, who the F is this? I'm like, who's messing with me? I'm like, I got a kid to pick up at school. I got shit to do. And I'm like, who is this? And I hang up. I think he called me one or two more times, and he called me because it was when Jared and others were working on the First Step Act. And I care a ton about criminal justice reform, and he called me to talk about it, and it was a totally productive conversation. But you are right. I wasn't prepared for how high his voice was.
I wasn't either. I found that out by surprise.
I wasn't prepared for how high it was. But he said to me, look up at your TVs, and Trump is on every single TV, right? He dominates the news cycle. There's much you have to cover, especially when he was in office, because he was the president of the United States. But it's a balance. I didn't then and don't now. I'm not putting any spokesperson on TV, okay? I'm not putting a spokesperson on TV, especially if the interview is going to be spicy and it's going to go viral. F that. I'm not here for your circus. I don't need to have a TV show with anything that goes viral ever, okay? Mm-hmm. Everything that I make on my show or I do for NBC News, I want to go through the lens. Did this help people get better and smarter? And we don't always, we're not successful at it every day, but we look at every segment after, and if it didn't, we say, well, we're not going to make that mistake again. And a person who's just a spokesperson is just a mouthpiece.
Right.
They're not working on policy, they're not working on solutions, and that mouthpiece, especially if they're working with the former president, there's a lot of lies. I'm part of the problem that in 2016, when we were putting all those surrogates on TV, even the best anchor out there, you're not going to stop every lie, right? If you and I start an interview and straight out of the gate, I'm telling you that the grass is blue and the sky is green, I'm not going to catch all of that. Mm. And we have to be hyper aware of that. And we should bring principles on TV, right? Like when my colleague, Kristen Welker, took over Meet the Press.
Shout out to Kristen for that. That's huge.
Huge. And I was blown away by the blowback we all got for her platforming Donald Trump. I'm going to tell you, I did not expect that. I didn't see that coming from a mile away.
I did because the precedent existed when CNN did it.
Yes, but CNN did a deal with the devil in agreeing to do a town hall with Donald Trump in a room full of 300 Trump super fans.
But I think that when you look at the core audience, or a significant amount of the core audience, I still wasn't surprised, because you're talking about a group of folks who have made up their mind. I might be willing to hear from the other side, but not that guy, because that guy almost blew this whole entire thing up. And I want nothing. And part of the problem is he had a platform that allowed him to do this. So why are we continuing to give him that platform?
Because at the time, he's the Republican frontrunner. And if we're credible, and we'll see, if we're credible news organizations, we're absolutely supposed to interview the Republican frontrunner. Just like CNN should have Donald Trump. Do I like the way CNN did it? Hell no. But that is an issue of the media has to figure out, how do we cover this guy? But to not cover him, to not sit down and interview him, I would absolutely interview Donald Trump. What I will not interview is one of these asshat human shields who work for him, right? Lots of the people who were in his administration could not have gotten themselves invited to the White House. I mean, Sean Spicer was his press secretary, okay?
Yeah.
The last time Sean Spicer had been on the White House property before being the press secretary, he was literally dressed as an Easter bunny, okay, for an event.
I did not know this.
Okay? There were
Fun facts.
There were people who were so blown away, right? Peter Navarro, these are kooks who were so blown away that they could even get an invite to have a cup of coffee at the White House, that they're willing to say or do anything. And I'm not speaking out of school based on the people I'm talking about who have been, Sean Spicer hasn't, but Peter Navarro,
look at John
who've been
Eastman.
charged by our government.
Right, like look at John Eastman. You're talking about someone who is a fringe lawyer with fringe theories on the outskirts of both politics and law, who's now indicted because he was so eager that someone would take him seriously that he would basically put anything on paper, even if it was illegal, to try to construct a scheme to overturn an election.
Walking in and out of the White House like he's got a key to the joint.
Yeah, okay. I get it. I think that, and I understand, and generally speaking, agree that from a journalism standpoint, it's important that someone who's in his position is questioned and is interviewed. And the spokesperson is not the person. That's not the guy. I think that it requires very, very tough journalism to actually do it.
For sure.
And that might be what people feel like they've lost the appetite for. They haven't seen, coming from anyone who's not affiliated with the right, your One Americas, your Fox Newses, your Newsmaxes, and all of that. And that is, in part, fueling the aversion.
People need to, I just think, we want the people, like I want to hear from President Biden more often.
Sure.
And so I just think that if any of these elected officials would like to hold these positions, look at Kirsten Sinema. When was the last time Kirsten Sinema did an interview? I can't even think of it. And if people want to be elected, if they want to serve the American people, they should sit down for interviews and tell their stories. Now, I think that as journalists, we should make sure, if we have the opportunity to interview lawmakers, we are doing our homework and we're asking the most important questions there are.
Right.
And it's too bad, right? Like, I cannot get Republicans on TV. I can get Republicans who hate Donald Trump on TV. And that's a bummer for me. I want them to come on television, but I get it. If you're one of them, they don't want to come on television because they don't want to have to explain him. Right? Yeah. They don't want to have to say, yep, he said that he thinks Hezbollah is pretty good. Here's why he said. They don't want to do that. Right. And it's a problem, and I don't know the right path for us to get back. All I know is we got to just cover the news and cover it honestly every single day, because that's what the American people deserve.
This has been a fantastic conversation. It's no surprise to me. But I want to ask you, give me, as someone who sort of watches these things, you are obviously in touch with the pulse of where things are headed. Give me, based off of where we are now, your 3 bold predictions in terms of what we will see either before the end of the year or like Q1 2024.
Going into this election, there are a lot of terrible, worrisome things happening around the world. However, from a voter perspective, I think the economy is going to be front and center. I think inflation is not as bad as it was in terms of prices going up, but life's really expensive.
It is.
Life being expensive matters to voters, because lots of people are going to say, you know what? The government doesn't work for me. It hasn't worked for me forever. irrelevant of who's in office. And lots of people aren't paying attention to politics, but they do know their life is really expensive. And this is a really difficult needle to thread for this administration because they have done a ton of positive things. And we have come out from the depths of economic perils during COVID, and we've made enormous strides. Obviously, no one was planning that there would be a war in Ukraine.
Right.
No one thought the situation between Israel and Hamas would happen, or not the average person. Big things that put a weight on our economy. It's going to be a really big deal for voters, and it's going to end up being a bigger deal than lots of things that we could all argue matter. But at the end of the day, lots of people are going, I got to put food on the table. I got to make sure I can afford to drive to work. That's going to be a big issue, number one. Number two, I am panic-stricken over misinformation and disinformation.
Sure.
If you thought it was bad in 2016, get ready. As rockets are going over the Middle East, misinformation is being shot from bazookas across the internet. Donald Trump running for president, he is running for his life.
Absolutely.
He is running to keep himself out of jail. He is running to seek revenge on his enemies, okay? You've got Vladimir Putin, who is dealing with a painful war in Ukraine, and we could argue that Russia's losing. It was losing. People are losing. People are dying and suffering every day. Vladimir Putin would love to not see Joe Biden in office.
Trump to be back, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right? He would love to see the NATO alliance weakened.
Absolutely.
And so where could lots of that misinformation come from? Other parts of the world that want to confuse us about our election here, about the situation in Ukraine, about the situation in the Middle East. And only making things worse, tech companies are leaning out of regulating, especially Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, because they don't want to appear biased. I'm very, very worried about misinformation. And my third prediction, I don't think Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift are going to make it. I know it's an unpopular
That is a
view,
shocker.
I'm excited for them. I'm a Taylor Swift fan. I think Travis Kelce's a great football player. What a personality. What a cutie. I mean, there is so much attention on this. I don't think it's going to last. I don't think it can.
Do these things ever last, though? Like the big celebrity, like mega, well, Kelce is if you follow sports, he's mega.
Yes,
right? Like,
which is why, I just love all the Taylor Swift game is on. She's made him. I mean, I love all that.
But do those spaces ever last?
I don't know, David and Victoria Beckham. You got a Spice Girl and the best soccer player ever.
Okay.
I know. Well, listen, people are divided whether they're rooting for them or not. I'm not rooting for or against them. I just think there is so much on this.
That's a lot.
There's no way they're lasting till Christmas.
Wow, you think before Christmas?
Which means
Taylor
we're going to get a great T Swift song next year.
She's going to write a song about it.
Yes.
She's going to capitalize on it. That's going to.
I don't think
that when they break up, that will be the one thing that comes out of the breakup. And I'm not wishing a breakup on them, but should they break up, that would be the thing.
Yes.
You know she's going to get in the studio. She's going to
100%. 100%.
It's going to be a hit.
Yes, 100%. So I'm excited about this relationship. But my prediction is it's got a short shelf life.
All right, last thing before we get out of here. We play another game on the show. Our colleague Jory Reid was on, and she did pretty well with this. You do not have this. It's called Life or Death Hip-Hop Karaoke.
Oh, my God.
You do not have...
As long as Joy Reid can beat Ari Melber at this game, that's all I care about.
Yeah, right. She can. She can. You do not have to recite the verse, although you get extra. At this point, if you did, you would be...
Okay, don't put pressure on me. Don't put pressure on me.
You'd be in the lead. But you don't have to.
Okay.
All right? So here's how it works. You have one of your... You have your favorite son. You don't have to tell me which one. But you have your favorite son.
It's my daughter. Neither of the boys. Neither of the boys.
I know that.
Yes.
Is captured. You get a phone call and they say, Stephanie, we got your son here and we will let him go unharmed as long as you can get one hip-hop verse, every single word right from start to finish. What are you choosing? Something you know from start. This is just one verse, not the whole song, just one verse.
Sir Mix-a-Lot, I like big butts.
Really? Baby got back? I'm not mad. Baby Got Back is a pretty good choice. I'm surprised. That's like Goonies for me in that it doesn't surprise me, but I still find it funny.
So my eldest son happens to love hip hop music and wants to go to every show he can possibly go to.
That's when we were talking about Travis Scott. Yeah,
yes,
Travis
yes.
Scott.
So after Travis Scott, he was on me to go to Gov Ball and Rolling Loud and all this nonsense. And I'm like, you can go, but I'm gonna have to go with you. You don't have to sit with me, and I'll bring all your buddies. You don't have to sit with me, but like every hour that we're there, because these are giant music festivals. I'm like, I just need you jerkos to check in with me. I need to see the whites of your eyes. I need to make sure everybody's A-okay, right? So the first year we go to Gov Ball, it's great. We go to Rolling Loud, fine. This year we're on our way to Gov Ball, and Donald Trump gets indicted. And I'm not going to make them get out of the car.
I think I remember.
And I'm like, all right, boys, Godspeed. I'm letting you go. I'm going back to work. I go back to work. They're at Gov Ball. I call my husband. I'm like, take my wristband. You're there. Of course, he's like, well, Steph, I'm blah, blah, blah. Who knows what stage he's at, what he's doing. 5 hours later, I happen to go on the Gov Ball Instagram page. And I go on the Gov Ball Instagram page, and I don't know how this son of mine wangles himself into some sort of VIP area. And you see Ice Spice come off stage, okay? So you see Ice Spice come off stage, she's backstage, and you see this idiot, 6 feet tall, white boy with giant blonde hair shout at her, I'm a munch. I'm a munch. And she looks at, and of course, Gov Ball thinks this is so absurd and so like this whole ridiculous. And I'm like, and all of a sudden I look at it and I'm like, oh my God.
As a follow-up, just to tell you guys how true that story is, I was actually in the building the night that this happened. I don't even remember. I guess because I was doing Stephanie's show. And so,
yeah, of course, because Trump was indicted. It was a legal day.
Right, so it was a legal day. It was a big legal day. So I was doing Stephanie's show. So Stephanie is like, I just saw my son say I'm a munch.
What is that?
What does that mean? Does that like mean that he eats a lot? And everybody else was like, no. She's like, he just said it to Ice Spice.
This is Ice Spice. What is this?
What does that mean? And we were just like,
everyone's dying.
No,
like,
stop that means
and everyone's going, stop talking. I'm like, and I'm about to hit Urban Dictionary. Somebody just takes the phone away. They're like, you should deal with this tomorrow.
Yeah. No,
yes,
not exactly what that meant.
Yeah,
but true story, funny story. Sir Mix-a-Lot, Baby Got Back. Would not have known that about my friend and colleague, Stephanie Rule. Listen, this has been an amazing conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun. We get a chance to talk all the time, but people don't really, like, they always talk about our chemistry, and I'm like, you have no idea, like, in real life.
Because that you're into me? Oh, our on-air chemistry.
See? You see the shit she does? Anyway, listen, this has been another amazing conversation on the Charles Coleman Podcast. Make sure you are liked, subscribe, and following us wherever you get your podcast, because we do this all the time. We are not just up, we're not just all the way up, we are in outer space, so come get with us on the Charles Coleman Podcast, your new favorite podcast, wherever they're heard. That's Stephanie Rule, and I'm Charles Coleman. Peace.